Hello, my name is Lisa Thomas, and the title of my presentation today is The Technological Mediation of Sustainability, Design as a Mode of Inquiry. And I'd like to start my presentation today with a quote from John Thackeray, which is that we're filling the world with amazing systems and devices, but we find it hard to explain what this new stuff is for or what value it adds to our lives. And this is a really baffling statement, but it's perhaps not surprising in light of the powerful promise that technology delivers. Technology improves our lives, it extends our human capability, serves our needs, it liberates us from pain, drudgery, inequality, unhappiness, injustice. Not surprising, because the powerful promise of technology is deeply ingrained and it stretches back some 500 years. And during this time, scientific thinking began to replace more traditional religious understandings of the world. And concomitant with that, it brought rapid advances in technology. It would appear when we see images like this and when we think about our unsustainable presence that somehow the promise of technology is unfulfilled. And there is a broad school of thought that recognises this and that recognises that it's actually the way we've come to understand technology over the past 500 years or so that is the problem. And for Davison, he says, for example, that we are blindly building a deformed world. Our modern world is unsustaining because it is deformed, and it is the blindness of our technological agency that is the cause of our world's deformation. Through the period of modernity, we've not recognised the really drastic impact that technology has on human culture. So obviously through modernity, the printing press upon the emergence of mass culture, for example, the invention of plastic. And here we are in late modernity now with the advent of smart technologies, the ubiquitousness of the digital world, and things have not changed so much. Our very way of reasoning about the world is based on unconsciously held assumptions and perspectives that strongly condition what we see happening around us before we even begin to reason about it. And in terms of trying to address sustainability through design, what we find is, because of the deeply ingrained modern worldview and because it's very difficult to break away from this, we approach sustainability through the same modern values that created unsustainability. And this has resulted in what's often termed an eco-modern approach to addressing sustainability. And in terms of the dominant approaches of design for sustainability, efficiency is often seen as the holy grail to addressing this problem. But the problem, of course, with efficiency is that it has no independent value, and it's dependent on the overall aim it's contributing to. So if that aim is to increase consumption, if it's to address sustainability through things to buy, then what happens is we are seeing rebound effects where, in actual fact, consumption, of course, does increase and unsustainability increases at the same time. And the line of inquiry that I've been looking at is the contributions that the field of the philosophy of technology can make to design and can make to designers. How can understanding technology in a broader sense, understanding what technology is, what it means for society and how we should act in relation to technology, how can that help designers? How can it inform designers to design with a deeper understanding of the impacts that technology might have upon the world? And the field I'm particularly interested in is a contemporary field in the philosophy of technology called post-phenomenology. In an absolute nutshell, what post-phenomenology does is that it views human-technology relations as actually being relations between human beings and their world. So when technologies shape human actions, they actually mediate a particular relationship between people and their world. And what's really important about post-phenomenology is that it doesn't advocate that either person or technology is more responsible for shaping this relationship. It's actually a co-shaping relationship between the two. So subjectivity and objectivity don't pre-exist the human-technology relation. They emerge as a result of that relation. So it seems that post-phenomenology may hold some really powerful insights for design and providing a lens for designers to design more substantively for sustainability beyond efficiency measures. And as Verbeek tells us, in shaping human actions and consequently in mediating human-world relations, technologies are themselves inherently ethical because ethics is concerned with how to act, and technologies effectively provide material answers to the question of how to act in the world. So what about engaging with post-phenomenology? Well, the line of inquiry I've been taking is engaging with post-phenomenology through design itself. And the reason I've been taking that approach is because design is increasingly being used in research, and especially for the ways in which design can illuminate previously unrecognised relationships. But really importantly, for the context that I've described, the kind of the rationalistic emphasis of the modern worldview, design brings really important forms of understanding to research that have been neglected, such as intuition, synthesis, personal judgment, imagination, etc., etc. So what I've been doing specifically is it's a form of design that's rooted in critical design practice, and it's about creating objects of inquiry, and it's a design research method. And what creating objects of inquiry means is creating physical, tangible, highly conceptual artifacts that seek to critically investigate the human world relations that are created through the human technology relation. So what objects of inquiry are? The vehicles for learning. They encapsulate thoughts, impressions, questions and aesthetic judgments in tangible forms, and they're ways of engaging with quite complex philosophical ideas. And to try and explain that a little bit better, I'm going to talk you through an example of one inquiring object, which is the Lakeland data stone. And this is a small piece of stone that has an SD storage card embedded into it. And what this stone was created for was to explore the impact of data storage capacity upon our human world relations. And I created this stone as a result of a trip to the English Lake District, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty in northern England. So it lends itself to taking photographs. And I found on a 2-day trip that I effectively took around 400 to 500 photographs. And this got me thinking about how did the availability of storage, of digital storage, impact upon the way I experienced that event? Did it make that event more meaningful? Did it detract from that event, for example? Because it seemed that was a lot of photographs to take in a relatively short space of time. So what I did, I was exploring the ways in which the technology, the ways in which the device and the storage perhaps disconnected me from that particular environment. It created a fragmented experience, very device-focused experience, and one that was frenetic and really acquisitive. It was about generating as many images as I could. So what I did to explore what did those images mean to me, what were my motivations for creating them, I decided to just destroy them all. And that's what I did. I destroyed the SD card. I didn't store the images. I destroyed them to explore. Really, I thought in destroying them was the only real way I could find out what they meant to me in the first place. So that's what I did, and I embedded them in a piece of stone as a way of experimenting with ways in which I could remember the images, regain access to them, how I could somehow still set them in stone and keep them with me. So that's what the stone was all about. And you might think, well, what does that tell us about design? How can that contribute to a designer's practice? But actually the stone itself, its physical presence, the fact that it exists can be reflected upon. It embodies some really alternate values to those of the modern worldview, and especially digital technologies, which are about efficiency, speed, acquisition. These are the things that are valued in digital technologies. But instead, what this stone does is it understands function in a different way. It does function. I can recollect the photographs. They're still there for me. They're intensely private. It's something that's not well understood in the digital world. So what the stone does is it throws up questions. How can we understand function differently in this world? On a more practical note, it asks us to encourage, how as designers can we encourage less acquisitive approaches to data generation? How can we design to support being present in the moment rather than distracted and frenetically acquiring images and possibly then sending them out there through social networks, etc. So something like this throws up lots of different ways of thinking about how we develop digital technologies. And that's the case for many of these objects. So what I found through my research is that creating objects of inquiry, they can support design students. Design education is my focus. They can support design students to design more substantively for sustainability. And what I did, I analysed the process through reflecting upon my own practice, but also through analysing reflective accounts of students involved in this research. And what I found was that the process itself is really critical to supporting students to develop more substantive approaches to sustainability. And three major themes emerged from this. The first was the role of disruption, the second was meaningful engagement with philosophical ideas, and the third was a different end for design. And to just finish on what those themes actually mean, it's a really disruptive way of designing because you're not embodying the usual values into design that we're accustomed to. So what emerges from this is a really unusual lens of materials with which to view technologies. It allows you to see them through a different lens of materials and configurations and patterns of use, which themselves give other ideas for designing. And what I found with my students, really critically, it challenged their preconceived ideas about the role of function and the role of the designer in late modernity. And once they challenged this and stepped outside of what the usual expectations are, they experienced a really heightened sense of creativity, and this gave them the freedom they reported to think more out of the box and more radically. And let's face it, we need more radical approaches to addressing sustainability. And really critically, what the role of disruption also did, it revealed to students how values come to be embodied in the outputs of their practice, that these technological artefacts and associated technologies, they're not neutral at all. And what this really did, it developed a deeper sense of responsibility in them. And this partially arose because there was no perceived client dictating what these students had to design. So they became quite a sense of exposure emerged through how disrupted they felt by this process, which served to deepen a sense of responsibility about design. So that was really, really interesting. The second thing was meaningful engagement with philosophical ideas. And what the process does, it's really difficult to learn about philosophical ideas, and they can be really abstract and high level, but the process really helps you to relate them to very specific technological artifacts and devices and help you to consider how those ideas might relate to the things that you're designing. So that was really important, but also for the students, the process of designing helped them absorb these difficult ideas in a different way. And what they often reported was that it helps them stop getting lost in more rationalistic information. Many of us will know what it's like to try and absorb some of these ideas through reading about them. The text can be very dense and it can be a difficult process. And moreover, it can be really difficult to see what's relevant about those kinds of readings to design. So the active, emotionally engaging process of design was really fruitful in this respect. And a really important offshoot of this was that students reported this kind of sense of learning of philosophical ideas about technology, that they found it really empowering because they were able to assert themselves as critically aware agents of change. So that was a really interesting finding too. And finally, what these artefacts also represent is a different end for design. They're not ends in themselves, they're actually a beginning, they're a starting point. They support the designer to judge what is actually desirable, as we saw with the Lakeland data storm. What the artefacts do, they look backwards and they look forwards. They simultaneously frame critical questions about the what is, whilst also suggesting material answers to the what could be, to how to answer those critical questions. So to conclude, incorporating post-phenomenology into design can support design students to substantively address sustainability and creating objects of inquiry can support students to discern radically different directions for the design of technological artefacts and systems, which is much needed. Thank you very much for listening.